Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this devotional from the You Need Faith in Jesus team. Today, we are diving deep into Genesis chapter 26. And let me tell you, this isn't just some ancient history lesson about a guy named Isaac. This story is, believe it or not, a powerful, timeless blueprint for how we can navigate our own trials, especially when life feels dry and barren, and find a real breakthrough. All right, so here's the journey we're about to take. We're going to walk through Isaac's life in this chapter, looking at 5 key moments. We'll start with a major test of his faith, see a pretty significant failure, watch him fight for his blessing, witness his powerful testimony, and then, most importantly, we'll figure out how to apply all of this to our lives today. So, let's set the scene. The story kicks off with a huge problem. There's a famine in the land. Now, just imagine that for a second. You're living in the very place God promised would be overflowing with blessing, and there's no food. It's barren. This is Isaac's first big test, just like his father Abraham faced. And the choice is simple, but it's not easy. Do you go with the world's solution, or do you trust God's guidance, even when it makes 0 sense?
And right in the middle of this crisis, God shows up. The command is crystal clear. Genesis 26 verse 2 says, "And the Lord appeared unto him and said, Go not down into Egypt, dwell in the land which I shall tell thee of." Now this is way more than just a travel suggestion. This is the fork in the road. This one choice is going to define everything that happens next.
So, you might be asking, what's the big deal about Egypt? Well, in the Bible, Egypt isn't just a country on a map. It's a symbol. It represents the world's way of doing things, relying on your own strength, your own smarts, your own resources. It represents bondage. So when God says, don't go to Egypt, he's calling Isaac to a totally different way of life, a life of faith that depends on a supernatural source, not on what the world thinks is logical.
Okay, so Isaac just got a direct word from God. You'd think his faith would be absolutely unshakable after that, right? Well, what happens next is a very real, very human moment. We're about to see him stumble, and it's a powerful reminder that even people who have a divine promise from God can still struggle with fear.
And this is where the story gets really raw. Literally, right after God promises to protect him, Isaac finds himself in a new town, and he gets scared. He's afraid the local men will harm him to get to his beautiful wife, Rebecca. So what does he do? He lies. He says she's his sister. It's just such a jarring contrast between God's incredible promise and Isaac's crippling fear.
Now, if that lie sounds familiar, it's because it is. As you can see here, it is the exact same deception his father, Abraham, used in a similar situation. It's almost like a spiritual déjà vu. And it's a sobering look at how these generational patterns, these snares of fear, can pop up again and again if we aren't vigilant. You know, the book of Proverbs just hits the nail on the head here. Proverbs 29:25 says, "The fear of man bringeth a snare, but whoso putteth his trust in the Lord shall be safe." That's the root of Isaac's problem right there. Fearing what people might do is a trap. It leads to compromise and bad decisions. But the verse also gives us the answer. True safety isn't in our clever lies, it's in trusting God, period. But here's what is so beautiful and so powerful about God. His plan does not depend on our perfection. Thank goodness, right? Even when Isaac totally drops the ball, God's faithfulness is on full display. He actually uses a pagan king, Abimelech, to call Isaac out and protect the covenant line. It just goes to show you, God's purpose is going to succeed even when we fail. Okay, so after that stumble and the course correction from the king, Isaac gets back on track. He stays out of Egypt, he commits to obeying God, and this obedience kicks off something amazing. It leads to both a miraculous blessing and a whole new level of conflict that he probably never saw coming. I love this part. This is what we could call God's economy. Isaac does something that makes no logical sense at all. He plants a crop in the middle of a famine, but because he's obeying God, he gets a 100-fold return in that same year. It's this incredible demonstration that God's provision operates on a completely different system, totally outside the world's limitations.
Now, you'd think this incredible, supernatural success would make him the most popular guy in town, right? Nope, it did the exact opposite. It triggered intense envy from the local Philistines. And that's a really important lesson for us. When the favor of God is clearly on your life, it can often attract hostility from a world that just doesn't understand it.
So how does this envy play out? It gets very specific. The Philistines start filling up the wells that Isaac's father Abraham had dug. Now, these wells are more than just holes in the ground for water. Spiritually, they're a symbol of the life-giving flow of God's Spirit. And the enemy's strategy to stop that flow is always the same. Just clog it up with earth, with worldliness, carnality, and distraction. So the Philistines kick Isaac out, but he doesn't give up. He just moves on and starts digging again. The first well he digs is immediately met with strife, so he calls it Esek, which means contention. So he moves on, digs another well. This time the opposition gets even worse. It becomes pure hatred. So he names that one Sitna. But I want you to notice what he doesn't do. He doesn't fight back. He doesn't argue. He just keeps moving and keeps digging. Finally, he digs a third well, and there's peace. He calls it Rehoboth, saying, "For now the Lord hath made room for us." His persistence won.
And here's the real breakthrough. This whole struggle, his persistence, his refusal to get into the mud and fight back, it all leads to a testimony so powerful that even his enemies can't deny what they're seeing.
Now, once he gets this breakthrough at Rehoboth, pay close attention to the order of what Isaac does next because it's so important. First, he builds an altar. Worship comes first. Second, he pitches his tent. His home comes second. And only then, third, do his servants dig a well to secure their provision. See the pattern? Seek God's presence first, establish your dwelling, then worry about provision.
And what's the result of living this way? The same king who kicked him out, Abimelech, comes back to him to ask for a peace treaty. And his reason is everything. He says, "We saw certainly that the Lord was with thee." Isaac's ultimate victory wasn't won through compromise or argument. It was won by the undeniable visible evidence of God's presence on his life.
Okay, so that's a fantastic story about famines and wells and kings from thousands of years ago. But what does it mean for us, right here, right now? Well, it turns out it means a whole lot. Let's break down some practical steps we can take away from Isaac's journey.
Here it is, a 4-step blueprint for your breakthrough, inspired by Isaac. First, dig again the old wells. Get back to the foundational truths of your faith that maybe have gotten clogged up with earth. Second, trust God's economy. Be willing to sow in faith, even when your circumstances look bleak. Third, win with meekness. Don't fight fire with fire. Overcome opposition with persistence and peace. And finally, number 4, prioritize the altar. Always seek God's presence before anything else and trust that He will make room for you.
So, as we wrap up, I just want to leave you with one question to think on. In what area of your life, maybe it's your finances, your relationships, your career, your ministry, in what area are you tempted to run to Egypt for a solution when God is actually calling you to stay put, trust Him, and start digging a well of faith right where you are?